Welcome to Miss Rose's story time. Today we're reading Carry On Mr. Bowditch, and Angus is with us. I don't know if you have a free friend with you that you like to read to. And this is Carry On Mr. Bowditch by Jean Lee Latham. I live in Georgia, and the Georgia governor has stated that school won't start until next school year now, and that we are only starting tomorrow until the 13th are only able to go to food places and medical places. So I hope you catch up on your reading. I hope you learn how to do other things like mend, sew, crochet, knit, create, paint, play music, write songs, write a story, garden, write senior citizens, other family members, learn a language, learn sign language. A lot of people are posting that they're bored, but I'm still not getting everything done I want to get done in a day. So let's just use this time to cultivate our giftings and talents and to read. So this is Carry On Mr. Bowditch, and we're in chapter 20. So let's go to chapter 20. Let's see here. And chapter 20 is on page 195. 195. All right, here we go. Chapter 20, Book Sailing. A month later, they had weathered the roaring 40s of the North Atlantic. The crew had begun to be sailors. The last poor lubber had got his sea legs. Fingers that had bled on the halyards were healed and black with tar. Every man could hand reef and steer. They could loose the guns and get ready for action. Not so smartly by half the crew Lem Harvey had trained, but they could do it. The Astray was her old self again. Dinghy decks were holystoned white, and the rigging was tarred, and dressed in its chafing gear. But a sullen mood hung over the ship like an evil mist over a swamp. Even when he was below deck in his cabin working, Nate could feel hatred staring at the back of his neck, as though an animal stalked him in the night. Loopy, was the worst of the crew because he smiled. A slim, swarthy young fellow, Loopy moved softly as a cat and purred when he spoke. "We can rest easy," Prince had said, "until the Cape." Nate wondered what Prince would say if he knew how his supercargo felt about Loopy. We're going to call him Lupe, okay? That it wasn't quite safe to turn your back on him. Was it imagination? Nate wondered, or was Lupe always watching him? Did Lupe follow him at night when he was on deck taking sights? For 2 weeks now he had that feeling of someone behind him. Twice when he'd been standing on deck in the darkness, he swung about quickly as though searching for a star in another direction, but he had seen no one, though tonight promised to be a good one for taking a lunar. Nate worked stubbornly at his checking of Moore's tables. Once he thought he heard his door open. He started, wheeled, and broke out in a cold sweat. This had to stop. He slammed Moore's book shut, picked up his sextant and slate, and went topside. Deliberately he went forward beyond the waist of the ship and stood at the larboard rail, facing the water. "I'll stand here," he told himself, "till I get over being a fool." He didn't know how long he'd been standing there when he left, rather than heard cat-soft movement behind him. A voice purred, "Senor?" Nate forced himself to turn slowly. "Yes, Lupe?" Lupe's teeth flashed white. He held out one brown hand. Across a palm lay a knife. "Do not start me what I say, senor. I say it quick or I lose the nerve. 2 weeks, maybe 3, I try to get up the nerve." So Lupe had been following him, Nate said. Again, "Yes, Lupe?" "I want to ask you, senor, could we trade the know-how?" "The know-how?" "I want to learn the navigation. I teach you to thread a knife. You teach me the navigation, eh?" Nate began to laugh, then stopped suddenly when he saw the smile stiffen on Lupe's face. "Forgive me, Lupe, but the idea of me learning to throw a knife has just struck me funny." "But you could, senor. And it is a good thing to know. Also, I teach you to sing the serenatas." Nate only smiled this time. "That's funnier still, me singing the serenade?" Oh. No, senor. You could do it. Then you win any senorita in the world. First, the knife. Your revivals, poof, they are gone. Then the serenata. Ah, the lady, she is yours. You want to get married, don't you, senor?" "I was married, Lupe. My wife is dead." Lupe's smiles vanished. His eyes widened. "You win the lady? No serenata?" "Por dos. How do you do it?" This time Nate didn't even try to stop laughing. "It's all right, Lupe. I'll be glad to teach you navigation. Tell me, how much mathematics do you know?" The numbers?" Lupe's smile flashed. "Very quick. I count on my fingers. Add up, take off. That's good, eh?" "Well, it's a start," Nate admitted. "Addition and subtraction come first. Then you'll teach me? What else do you know about numbers?" Lupe's smile failed again. "Just that take off, senor. There's more? I cannot learn the navigation." "Addition and subtraction, let me think. Lupe," Nate took a turn on the deck. "If we had a logarithmic table of all the trigonometric functions, you could work any problem in navigation with nothing but addition and subtraction." "Log tables? I make them," Lupe promised. "With the wood?" No, Lupe, they aren't that kind of tables. These tables are just lists of numbers. I could figure them out, all right?" "You do that, senor? For Lupe?" On one condition," Nate promised. "Anything, senor. I teach you magnificent serenatas. You have the world at your feet. You can't fail." "Is that how you won your wife?" I'm sorry. "Is that how you won your wife, Lupe? With serenades?" Lupe sighed. "No, senor. She not marry Lupe. Her brothers, they are first mates. They say she cannot marry Lupe. Cannot marry a man before the mast." Nate took another turn on deck until he was sure he could keep from smiling. He faced Lupe again. "I'll teach you on one condition, Lupe, that all the foxal studies with you." "Por Dios, but why?" "Because it's easier to teach a dozen men than one man. How about it, Lupe? You think you can persuade them?" For a moment, Lupe frowned. Then his slow smile stretched again. He looked at his knife. He purred. "Yes, senor, they do it. They do anything for Lupe." He prowled away and disappeared in the shadows. The next day, during the dog watch, Nate began. The men worked hard. Lupe saw to that, but Nate worked harder. The tables, he figured, now were longer than main to bowline, and explanations that had worked for the other crews were still too hard for these men to grasp. So they worked across the equator to the Cape, and into the Indian Ocean they slaved, Nate and the men before the mast. Mr. Townsend, the petulant second mate, came to Nate's cabin one night. "Mr. Bowditch, just what are you doing with the forecastle?" "Teaching them navigation." Mr. Townsend's lip curled. "How much can they learn?" Nate laid aside more and spread the long racquetball table he was making. "When these are done, every man of them will be able to work a lunar." Mr. Townsend flushed, then whitened. "What kind of discipline will you have on this ship, teaching the hands something your officers can't do?" "No reason you can't learn it too," Nate told him. "You're just as bright as Lupe." I'm sorry. "You're just as bright as Lupe, I think. Now, if you'll excuse me." Mr. Townsend stamped out. Nate went back to checking Moore's tables. At last, he muttered in disgust, slammed the book shut, and went to Prince's cabin. "I'm through with Moore. Do you know how many errors I've found so far? 8,000. Prince stared. He said it was impossible. "I can prove it. By point. Do you want me to get my fingers and—" Captain Prince said no with trimmings. He'd take Mr. Bowditch's word for it. "So, Mr. Bowditch, what now?" "I'm going to write a book of my own, and it's going to have 3 things these books don't have. First, the tables will be correct. Second, every sea term, every maneuver, everything a man needs to know will be explained in words any able seaman can understand. Third, I'll put in tables, so that any seaman can solve problems in navigation, even if he has to count on his fingers to add." Captain Prince thought it was the wildest idea he ever heard. He said so, with more trimmings. "Even if you could do it, which I doubt, it would take you the rest of your life, if you live that long." "I can do it," Nate roared. "I'm doing it now. If I can teach Lupe to take a lunar, I can do anything." He stopped. Silence echoed in the cabin. He'd been yelling again. Captain Prince stared at him for a count of 10. "Carry on, Mr. Bowditch." "Aye, aye, sir," Nate went on topside. Tonight was going to be a good time to start teaching the foxes to take lunar observations. By the time the Astra reached Sunda Strait, Nate had made good his threat to Mr. Townsend. He had taught the crew to make lunars, and Mr. Townsend too. The second mate had fought the idea like a harpooned whale, but he had to learn in self-defense. Here's a picture. This chapter's pretty fun. When they anchored to Batavia, Nate scratched and grinned with relief. They had sailed with a sorry crew and arrived with very able seamen. Smiling, he went ashore with Captain Prince and Mr. Cheevers to bargain for their cargo of coffee. 2 days later, the 3 men stared at each other. There was no coffee to be had. The British captain gloated over them and made polite sounds of sympathy. "Too bad your voyage for nothing. An expensive mistake. If you'd sail with a cargo, you could sell that. But you sailed in blast, didn't you? Nothing but spice. And now nothing to buy. Really too bad." Captain Prince said 3 was always Manila. The British captain looked even more pleased and sounded more sympathetic. The monsooners made dear fellow. Perhaps you don't know about them. Steady as the trade winds, accepting that they do vary with the seasons. Just now, if you tried to make Manila, you'd be sailing in the teeth of the northeast monsoon all the way. One doesn't sail to Manila this time of year. It just isn't done." They returned to Astra, a grim trio. Charlie felt their mood as they sat down to mess. Dishes rattled, when he served them. "Too bad," Mr. Cheever said, "that our trip has failed." Nate banged his fists on the table. "It hasn't failed. We can still go to Manila." Mr. Cheever lifted an eyebrow. "Fighting head winds all the way. That my fine-figured friend would take some navigating." Nate snapped. "So we navigated." Prince stiffened. His eyes narrowed. His glance flickered from Mr. Cheevers to Nate and back again. "Mr. Cheevers, how soon can we be ready to sail to Manila? Again, Mr. Cheevers stared at his captain and shuddered. But, sir, the headwinds." "Mr. Cheevers." "Aye, aye, sir." With a wild look in his eyes, Mr. Cheevers went on deck. Nate scrawled a quick note to Polly and sent it to a ship that was weighing anchor for home. They were going on to Manila, he told her, so they'd be a little longer getting home. A good trip so far, a fine crew. He smiled a little as he wrote that, but after all, they were a fine crew now, weren't they? On deck that night, Charlie approached Nate. "Mr. Bowditch, sir, the monsoon, it's blowing the wrong way now." "Yes, Charlie. And we'll be taking against the wind, zigzagging back and forth, like we did for a little while coming around the Cape." "Yes, all the way to Manila?" "All the way." "We will do it all right, sir?" "Of course," Nate told him. "It's a simple matter. We'll do it all right." Day after day, the Astray moved in a crazy zigzag. Once she sailed for the Sunda Strait to Manila in 15 days. No making it 15 days this time. December ended. January came and passed. February began. 8 long weeks out of Batavia, and Astray anchored in Manila Harbor. The Forbes of Boston was anchored nearby. Her master, Captain Hudson, came on board the Astray to ask news of home. "And how was it around the Horn?" "We came by the Cape," Prince told him. "Stopped at Batavia. No coffee there, so we came on to Manila." Captain Hudson stared. "Not in the teeth of the monsoon?" Prince shrugged an offhand away. "Why not?" But no no man," Prince smiled. "No fools tries to sail in the teeth of the monsoon. Is that what you meant?" "Well, yes," Hudson admitted. "I mean the navigation. You'd have to have a man who could work lunars." Prince shrugged again. "What's so hard about lunars? Every man in my crew can work a lunar." Hudson's face was blank. Then he laughed. "Come on, tell me, how did you do it?" "Just sheer blind luck," Prince said. "I'm not joking. Ask any man on board." Charlie, who was nearby, straightened and cleared his throat. Prince nodded. "Go ahead, Charlie. Tell Captain Hudson how you calculate a lunar." Excuse me. "Aye, aye, sir." Charlie stiffened, stared straight ahead, and rattled off the formula. "That's the way we do it, sir. It's better than waiting for a moon to occult a star." He looked at the bewildered Captain Hudson. He added helpfully, "Occult, that means cover up, sir?" Captain Prince had a sudden coughing spell. A British ship hailed the Astray. Captain Willoughby came aboard. He, too, wanted to know how it was around the Horn. Captain Hudson began to enjoy himself. "They just arrived from Batavia." "Yes, we know. It isn't done, but they did it." Captain Hudson began to enjoy himself. Oh, yeah, I already said that. I'm sorry. Captain Willoughby searched their faces as though trying to figure out a joke. "You mean you have a man who can work lunars?" Captain Hudson laughed. "One man? They have a crew that can work lunars. The cabin boy just explained it to me. I tell you, Captain Willoughby, there's more knowledge of navigation on this American ship than there has ever been before in the whole of Manila Bay. From across the deck, Lupe lifted his hand in a salute to Nate. His grin flashed white in his swarthy face. A smile danced in his eyes. Nate grinned back at him. "A good man, Lupe." Captain Hudson grinned at Charlie and said he wished he could stay around a while to study with him, but he was just about to up anchor and clear for home. Nate scrawled another note to Polly and sent it by the Forby. They'd be a little longer getting home than he had thought when they left Batavia, he told her. A little delay on the trip to Manila, but everything was fine. They should make it home by September if all went well. It was September when they sailed smartly into Boston Harbor. Every man an old salt, the Astray stripped of her chafing gear and gleaming with fresh paint and varnish. When they paid off the crew, Lupe reached a calloused hand to wring Nate's finger. Senor, you are one guy. Ever you sail again, you send for Lupe, eh? I doubt if I will, Nate told him. I think I've swallowed an anchor. 2 weeks later, Captain Price and Nate were on the road home. The first people they saw in Salem were Amanda Harvey and her brother Zach. Nate hailed them, stopped the horses, and got out to greet Amanda. "What's the news from Lem? Your book sailor, Amanda." Amanda began to cry, and Zach hurled a sting of curses. Book sailing had cost Lem's life. The Betsy had gone aground because of book sailing. "Talk to Tim Yates," he sneered. "He's the only one that survived. He'll tell you about book sailing. Come on, Amanda." He grabbed her arm and shoved the sobbing woman along the street. Nate got the story from Tim Yates when they reached Essex. Tim did not rage as Zach did, but what he said cut almost deeper. A mistake in Moore had wrecked the Betsy. It seems Moore had figured 1800 was a leap year, so he had the calculations for the moon off. Seems like an awful little mistake in a book makes a big mistake in miles. That's what I heard the mate say when was trying to get off the reef. I don't understand how much about it. Don't want to, I guess. You see, Mr. Bowditch, if he hadn't been depending on the book, he'd have been sounding log, lead, and lookout. That's the way to sail. We depend on the book, though, so we went aground. When we saw we couldn't get off and we was going to break up, we tried to run the boats in. We did through the surf, but it was dark as hold in a storm. We couldn't watch for the rollers. We couldn't see the rocks. When I came around, I was the only one there. Nate said, "You'd have been safer heading straight out from shore." "Yeah," Tim agreed. "I guess that ought to be in a book, too." Then he flushed. "I didn't mean that like it sounded, Mr. Bowditch, but a book ain't no good. I wonder if that's what happened to your brothers, too, book sailing." Ned wet his lips. "My brothers?" "Hab and William had both been lost," Tim told him. He said again he was sorry and shuffled off. Wow. Well, for a fun, happy chapter in the beginning, kind of got a little grim there at the end. But Nate did find a lot of mistakes in the Moore, so hopefully his book will be better. I can see kind of both sides. Maybe both could be used. What do you think? Let me know. Please like, share, and comment, and read 30 minutes every day, and enjoy this time with your family and friends. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in to Miss Rose's story time. I'm going to show you my orchard. See my orchard? Isn't it pretty? Thank you.